A musculoskeletal system is an unstable structure affected by gravity, stabilized by the central nervous system. And you must have a dynamic equilibrium. Now stability, a stable structure will not guarantee function. So you should not look for structural stability at the expense of function, and I say that for those who love fusing spines.
Thank you.
Now, there are some benefits with instability. We construct unstable machines. This is one of them. Why do we do that? Because if a missile is fired at this plane, letting go an unstable machine is much faster to evade the missile than forcing a stable machine to escape the problem. And that's why we can beat a huge bull, because we are more unstable than him. Now the functional stability is important because the eye and ear, the information platform, must be stabilized even if the animal is running. Look at this, how stable the head is. And that is even better demonstrated in the hummingbird. Look how the beak is precise. The animal beats the wings 100 times per second. And if he had to use his muscles to compensate for the motion of the wings, he will catch fire. So there is... So the anatomy of the neck is constructed to decouple the head from the body. That's what we have. We have a cervical lordosis to decouple the motion of the shoulders when we walk at no energy cost. So the stability, the easy way it's done, you can read that in any newspaper. It's very popular. It's an engineering concept which makes unrealistic hypothesis. A material is homogeneous. Don't think so for us. Invariant, for sure not. You get older. And there is an energy wall. Now have a look at this because it's a nonsense which is done all the time. This is a classical representation of stability. You get a nice ball rolling and finally it stops there. And those gurus will tell you, well, it stays there because there is an energy wall. It costs more to move away from the stable point. My problem is that I can move my arm and I don't hit anything. So this does not exist. And there is another problem. If I stay there, what happens? Well, the tissue will deform. The collagen will stretch. Now, we have to look at the time response of the collagen, not in terms of minute, as was done by Professor Solmov, but in terms of seconds. This is a very early part of the curve it showed you. That test was done by Nakemson in 1960, and the time constant of collagen is 1/3 of a second. 1/3 of a second. If you do anything, you cannot hang on for a second doing that. And you know when you lift a load, you cannot stop. Because if you stop 1/3 of a second, the whole fascia will stretch, force the ligament to work, and you have to drop the ball. Now the implications is that the collagen will not permit to keep you a static posture for very long. You have to redistribute the load between muscles and ligament and change the internal distribution of the load. And if you hope to rehabilitate a patient, there is not a single exercise that will work. You have to teach the patient to recover all the various distribution of load. And you must train him with a variety of exercises because he will switch continuously from one to the next. So the implication is that changing the internal distribution of the load does not imply changing the posture. I can stay like that, but I will change my pathway distributions. And that's what you must teach the patient to do. And that explains now the redundancy. You know that was bothering us earlier? We tried to eliminate it. The redundancy will allow the biomechanical tissues to be loaded for a short period of time when you still achieve your objective. The function drives the anatomy, not the other way around. If you need to keep your arm like that, the anatomy will switch over so that you keep the arm like that. So the search for unicity was the other mistakes. And it was triggered by the ignorance of the viscoelastic property of collagen. Oh, thank you for giving me another 30 minutes. So if you try to freeze a lift, as I explained to you, the collagen will stretch, the contribution disappear, and then you oblige the muscle to take over the load. And we know we don't have enough muscle to go more than 50 kilo anyway, so you are stuck and you have to abort. Now viscoelasticity is interesting. You know it deforms with time, it will deform the tissues, and that's why continuous postural changes will be necessary. The postural stability is in fact obtained by switching over muscle to ligament, back to muscle to ligaments. And this oscillation is fundamental to the maintenance of our positioning in the gravitational field. And the next question is how the switchover is controlled. And the switchover is controlled by the control of lordosis. This is the interesting part. That is the single most important parameter to measure and rehabilitate. If you have one thing to do for a low back pain patient, lordosis comes first. Now the control of lordosis is done, as you see, by muscles, and you have basically the psoas in front and multifidus on the back. I want to bring your attention to the fact that psoas is not designed to balance the load because it is attached to the fulcrum. So the constant force transmission of the fascia demands a very specific spine-pelvis coordination. And I show you that in this guy from Mexico. 30 degrees is the angle of trunk flexions, and you have the distribution of forces between the fascia and the muscles. Now this little guy here has the opposite, a strong muscle contribution and little on the fascia because simply he does not have enough anatomical structures to have the fascia works. Now the fascia work is triggered by trunk flexions, is also controlled by trunk flexions, as you can see here. It is also controlled by the rotation of the pelvis, which for a given angle of flexions, you can change the distribution of forces between muscle and fascia. So we have two mechanisms to control the fascia. We have the trunk flexion that will change lordosis, and we have the pelvic rotation that will also change lordosis. Now when I am on the dock, to unload boats, and you're going to load my shoulders, what do? I tuck the pelvis. Fascia is tight, the forces go straight to the ground. So lordosis and gait, we had a closer look at this. This is somebody instrumented. Yeah, just give me 2 minutes. We measured some data, the position of the external markers on the skin, and from that we can get information on the change in lordosis. And this is what we saw basically during a gait cycle. Lordosis changed quite a bit from flexion to extensions, about 8 degrees. Now this has a fundamental effect for those who like to do hiking. When you go hiking, you essentially, when you walk, the pelvis rotates and the spine flex and extend, flex and extend. So when it flexes, collagen is loaded, muscle loaded, collagen loaded, muscle loaded. You can walk for a long time. So there is a need to switch over which structures is doing what. And the concept of best position does not even arise because the objective of having minimum stress at protecting the tissue is the same here or there. And in both cases, which are optimum, the function, the anatomy will follow. Both functions which are to be done, the fascia role will be critical. So what we found as a byproduct is that we will not exceed 2/3 of our ultimate limit to rupture. Somehow the body will prevent you from going beyond the 2/3 limits. Similarly, the IV joint will not rotate more than 2/3 of the optimum normally. And that's explained why people under intense fear can do physical feats which we don't understand. The last third will become accessible if you are sufficiently excited. So conclusion, we are structurally unstable. It's a fundamental instability because this is a benefit indispensable for survival as a species. A static posture does not exist, and the reason is that the collagen is viscoelastic. The second conclusion is that the fascia trigger a continuous switch of forces and loading between all the tissue of the machine to prevent each tissue to be tired too quickly. And rehabilitation demands restoration of all the structures that are being switched over continuously and over time. And the last conclusion, we can see that the fascia is more than a part of a force transmission system. It is necessary for survivability of the spinal column under load, and a subject with a damaged fascia may not be rehabilitated in spite of your good intentions. Thank you.